It's time. Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. People just like you. Well, today is the third Tuesday of the month, which means it's time for Vinegar and Spice and Everything Nice. Usually with Thomas Allen and Nick Davoren. One is from California Balsamic, one is from local Spicery. Thomas is on the road and unable to join us today, so Nick is flying solo, and he is dedicating the whole show to mustard. How to make 3 flavors, very easy actually, of not only mustard, but SOS-free mustard. No sugar, no oil, no salt. I don't know if you guys are a ketchup person or a mustard person. My husband is definitely a mustard person. I'm a barbecue sauce person, but I like mustard on things that are great on potatoes, even cold potatoes, on sweet potato fries. They're great in salad dressings. But as of right now, it's really hard to find mustard without salt, at least commercially. There's a couple places that make them. So Nick's going to show you something that I learned in culinary school 20 years ago, but forgot: how to make your own mustard. Please welcome to the show, Nick Davoren of local Spicery. How are you, Nick?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. We live near each other. It's so great. I get to see you from time to time. You were at the conference. I hope you sold a bunch of Salacious. What was the most popular spice that people bought at the conference a couple of weeks ago?
You know, mostly we had sets that we were selling. And all of them just sold out pretty quickly. So it's hard to say that anything went faster than any others. But they were very well received, and mostly just great to get to connect with people, see the faces of people we talk to on the phone all the time. And it's a great time.
I know you and Thomas, the dynamic duo. You know, it's so funny. I was in Santa Rosa for 2 weeks on vacation, if you will, at the True North Health Center, and I went into Penzies. I did buy one thing. It's only because you don't carry it, but I felt so guilty going into another spice store, you know. And let me tell you, the one thing that I buy at Penzies, and I don't think you even make it, and I'm telling you this because maybe you could. They have something called Potato of Love. And Charles, can you grab it for me, the bag in the pantry that's in a paper bag? And what it is, Nick, is little tiny dehydrated purple sweet potatoes. And I use it because I don't use sugar. So like if I'm making a festive like cake or something or cupcakes, I use it as sprinkles. And it's just brilliant, you know. So I don't know if that's something you could ever make or have, but that's the one thing that I do buy outside of your system.
Well, you know, Penzies was kind of the gateway drug for us. It was, you know, when we started in our own cooking, getting into different kinds of spices, they were, you know, there was no one else out there that had, you know, the range of product that we got. Definitely the world of the Gucci spice shop was started by Bill Penzi, and he's someone you have to admire.
Yeah. Well, you know, they do one thing there that I think is clever, and I'm not sure if you do that or not, because usually I'm ordering online. And even though I've been to both of your shops occasionally, and they actually if you want it, they hand you a piece of paper with every single salt-free spice that they carry to make it easier for you to navigate their store.
Yeah. So we don't exactly do that, but we did recently at Tiburon. We set up a table that has all of our spice-free blends on it. So you can just go right there and find them all. But I think having a sheet of paper like that's a very good idea.
Yeah, I think it is too. You know, I've mentioned to Sephora many times in Ulta, you know, those of us that are vegan and only buy vegan makeup, why can't you just like have a vegan section or label it? So this is the one thing I cheat on you with, because I don't think you make it. I don't know if you ever see it.
No, but never seen it before.
It's very cool. It's purple, and it's just, I use it like, you know, for sprinkles. But anyway, other than that, I'm completely loyal to local spices.
So we're going to be doing mustards today, and it's kind of interesting that Thomas isn't going to be here because many mustards use vinegar, and part of what we're going to be talking about is the relationship between vinegar and mustard. So in an homage to Thomas and California Balsamic, in his own way, in our own way, it'll still be spices and vinegar. Making mustard, there were 2 things that drove me to it. One is, you know, AJ, you've mentioned several times how difficult it is to get a salt-free mustard that tastes like French's mustard, which is, you know, the traditional American prepared mustard. So that's going to be the first recipe that I do is that one, because I think we've got that pretty well nailed. We're going to go through 3 different methods of making mustard, but there's a lot I think to begin with, and what I hope to kind of share in this short time that I've got you, what is mustard, how is it used, and really kind of learn the mechanics of it, because the best thing about mustard isn't to be able to follow a recipe to make something simple, but it's really kind of a foundational block from which you can accomplish so much. And there's so many flavors that can be added and so many ways that you can cook with it. In a lot of ways, the mustard seed is the original European spice. Historically, it is the oldest spice that we know of that's endemic to Europe, that grows there naturally, and you find it throughout all every cuisine throughout Europe. It's so pervasive. It's almost like I've heard it compared to that mustard is to the northern latitudes what chilies are to the southern latitudes, and I think that's fairly apt. And I also like to think of it kind of as the Swiss Army knife of spices, because it fits in so many different ways. Let's take it back to the known use of mustard as a condiment. Goes back about 2,500 years, and simultaneously in China as well as in Rome. In China, they were making a prepared mustard, and it's interesting. Chinese prepared mustard is just ground mustard seed and water. In Europe, it became a whole lot more complicated and interesting. But the word that we use, mustard, actually comes from Latin, 2 distinct words, mustum, and mustum is the must, which is when you're making wine. The first time when you crush the grapes, you end up with a heavy liquid that's juice and grape skins and seeds and everything. That's must. And ardens, mustum ardens, which means hot must. And they would make a dish from the must of the grapes and mustard seed to make it hot. And many people will probably connect immediately, as I did when I learned that in Italy there's still a very strong tradition of making hot fruits with mustard. Hot, fruit mustard's usually a preserved fruit or a dried fruit, and they're quite delicious. So mustard is hot must. It's also important to kind of, for a second, just consider the mustard seed. They're these beautiful little orbs, and to people like me that want to be able to mill them, it's important to point out that these beautiful little orbs are hard and woody on the outside, and on the inside they have a starchy, oily core. That makes mustard incredibly difficult to grind, at least with the ways that we mostly grind things in large quantities. So to grind mustard, you can't use the standard hammer mill. You have to use a stone mill or what's called a ball mill. Anything that doesn't use a screen, because the screens just clog up. And it's interesting that the methods of making mustard comprise with, how do you start with this ball and how do you get that starchy stuff out of the center, which is what makes kind of the flavor of the mustard. The other thing that you have to think about is when you're making prepared mustard, you're actually working with a reaction. And when the reaction is set off when you add a cold liquid to the mustard, and that could be ground mustard like this. It could be whole mustard seed, whatever. But it's the cold liquid that starts the reaction, and with that reaction, the mustard begins to get spicier and the flavor richer and stronger. And then you can curtail that reaction when you get to the level you want by adding an acid like a vinegar or some citrus juice or a verjus, or by refrigerating. So a big part of how you make your mustard is giving it that time to react and to build to where you want it, and being careful with how you prepare it. The first one I'm going to make, actually, the American prepared mustard, is interesting because we're going to heat it, which, heat in and of itself slows down the reaction. But by slowing down the reaction, it kind of pulls out the rich, more umami-esque flavors of mustard, which is, what we're looking for in a prepared mustard. And I'm going to dive right into that. And we'll probably make 2 of the 3 recipes that I put up online. To start with, making mustard is one of those ones where you'll always see in the recipe use a non-reactive pan. And you can say, well, what's a non-reactive pan? A non-reactive pan, basically, in my experience, is one of 2 things. It's either, a porcelainized cast iron pan like this, where it's porcelain on the inside, or it's stainless steel on the inside, or if it has a like a non-stick finish. But if it's a soft metal, like just steel on the inside, if it's cast iron, if it's aluminum, it will react with the acidity of the vinegar and the acidity of the mustard. And what does that reaction do? Well, it's gonna turn your cooking dark. It's gonna add kind of a metallic flavor to it. It's not very pleasant. So that is important. That is non-reactive. What I put in this pan, this one, the American mustard uses milled, whole milled just mushroom powder. We're not going to deal with the whole seed yet. In this case, the mustard powder is 100% yellow mustard. We use 3 different species of mustard. We use the yellow, we use the brown, we use the black. We'll talk about each one of them. But this is just yellow mustard, a little tiny bit of garlic powder, and a little tiny bit of turmeric. The turmeric is there primarily for color. And to start, we're going to start the reaction. I need this spilled, so I'm going to put a little bit more water in here. It's just from the tap, but it is a 1/2 cup of cold water. And putting the cold water in, that begins the flavor reaction. Okay, I'm just going to stir it up a little. Now, I think, normally if I had all day to do this, I might actually do this and let it sit for a 1/2 hour to an hour, because by letting it sit, you're going to let it build in the flavor. But we're going to just keep moving on right now. So the next step, once you do that, is to apply the heat. And so I'm going to turn this on. I'm going to turn it down. So this is I have not tested this on this cooktop. I've been using my gas cooktop in preparing these recipes, so we may have some surprises. But I usually do this on my range at home at low heat. You don't want it to cook too fast, and you definitely do not want it to overcook or to burn. That draws out a bitter flavor. Now, even if you are detecting a bitter flavor in your mustard, it doesn't mean you blew it, because it's, as I said, it's a reaction, and the flavor changes all the time. So the mustard that you finish and you put in the refrigerator is going to have a bitter flavor, but over time that bitter flavor goes away as the mustard processes. So just in the few seconds we've been talking, this is already thickening nicely. We have 2 things happening that's doing that. One is the starches in the mustard are combining with the water, but the other is also by applying just a little bit of heat, it's causing it to thicken. It thickens fairly quickly. And how do you know it's done? Well, the real way to know it's done is by tasting it, knowing that you've got it to the taste. But I found that with the prepared mustard, it's going to continue to reduce like this. Very shortly, it'll get to the point where it's kind of a thick paste that just sticks to the spoon, and you'll know what I mean when I'll pull it out and show you. But that's the point when you pull it out to stop. We're getting there rapidly. While I'm doing this, I'm going to talk just briefly about the 3 species of mustard seed. There's the yellow mustard seed, which we're all well familiar with. Typically, if you go to a grocery store to buy mustard seed, that's what they're going to have. There's also the second most common is the brown mustard seed. And then there's the very uncommon, at least in culinary circles, black mustard seed. the brown and the black look alike, but they get progressively stronger and stronger levels of heat. And by heat, I'm talking about, like a horseradish flavor of heat. And the black is actually quite strong. And if you want to make a hot mustard, that's what you want to have. But if you don't like hot mustard, I would really stay away from the black because it can be overwhelming. But it can also, here we are. I mean, you can just see that just sticks to the spoon, and that's about where you want it. I'm going to just check it. Okay, perfect. I'm going to do one thing. Anytime that you heat mustard up, you're kind of killing some of the flavor. So I'm just gonna, and this is not a measurement. I'm just taking a little tiny bit of dried mustard that I'm adding back in here, just to kind of ratchet that flavor up. Now, in the mouth right now, what I'm getting is, this is, as I said, just mustard seed and water. This would be like if you've heard of an English mustard. English mustard is mustard seed and water, as is Chinese mustard. Both of those usually are quite spicy. In the mouth, this tastes very spicy right now because the reaction's been occurring. It's getting hotter and hotter. So what we're going to do is what we said we're going to do, namely, I'm going to whisk just a little bit of vinegar into it, which gives it that flavor that we all associate with mustard, but it also stops the reaction. So here we go.
Don't they call yellow mustard ballpark mustard?
Some people do. And actually, the yellow mustard seed is in many cases called white mustard, white, brown, and black. When we set up the company, you kind of have to pick what's the common name you want to use, and we use the yellow. But yeah, it is basically, this is ballpark mustard. All right. So that's basically it. Usually at this point, it can be a little bit more runny, but this, as you can see, this really is just absolutely at the texture that you want a mustard to be. So I'm not going to do anything more. If it's a little bit too liquidy, you can just put it on the heat for another couple of seconds and whisk it down to get it to where you want. But here's the last step, which is sumac. I'm just going to put a half a teaspoon of sumac in, which gives it that salty flavor. You can also definitely use salacious. In this case, I wanted the purity of flavor, so I'm going with the sumac, and we're just going to mix it in, and that's it. I'm just going to set this aside, but we're going to put it in the refrigerator fairly quickly so that we stop the reaction. You don't want to serve that right away. I would let it sit in the refrigerator for 2 or 3 days, and the heat that's in it right now is going to calm down, and you're going to have a solid ballpark mustard. This is an example of some that I made just a few days ago, and I'll put it up here because this also answers the big question we get a lot, which is, well, what do I do with your jars when I'm done with them? They're perfect for putting mustard in.
Well, why don't you just make it and sell it so that we don't have to?
Oh, because we started this company based on the joy of cooking. And what we want to do is share that joy, and we want to get people trying new things. That and making mustard and other things that are wet is a significant change in our permit and significant change in our process and everything we have to do. So we are just a dry process, and if I added anything that was liquid, it would basically be a whole different room, a whole different process that would, the level of complexity would just be huge. So let's talk a little on on taking the whole seed and making a mustard. I posted online 3 distinct recipes. The first one is the one we just made. The second one is one that uses, again, that doesn't use vinegar just a tiny bit of vinegar at the end to stop the reaction, but it's primarily one where it's mustard and water, or I like to make it with a little bit of stout, and it's called a country mustard. It's about half. It's made about half with the seed and half with the ground mustard. But what we do with the seed is a little bit different. The seed, the exterior of the seed is very tough and very woody, and just by itself, not really something that's pleasant to pick out of your teeth. So what we do is we add the vinegar right at the beginning, and the vinegar breaks down and conditions the husk of the seeds. And you can do that a few hours in advance, but I like to give it a full day at least. In fact, I'll show you. I've got this, which we're going to use to make the next mustard. And this is it's a blend of mustard seeds swimming in vinegar and water. And it's been in there for about 2 days. We have a good friend who's a French chef down in Santa Cruz, and his secret weapon is this exactly. He carries mustard seed that he marinates in a blend of vinegars, and he marinates them for weeks. But his intention is to get the outer part of the seed as soft as possible, and he sprinkles them on his food just like as a little finishing piece, because they look lovely on the plate, and then they just burst with the flavor when you bite into them. So this in and of itself is a great form of prepared mustard, just marinated mustard seed like that. In this case, what's in this jar, it's about half and half yellow mustard seed and brown mustard seed, and that's kind of a typical blending. Dijon mustard is typically half and half. English mustard is typically half and half. If anybody ever buys golden mustard, Gulden, as a dried mustard, and you say, boy, why is that so much stronger than all the other mustard? Well, it's because 50% of it is brown seed, as well as the yellow. But this is one point where you make your decision how hot you want it to be. And the yellow all by itself is relatively hot, relatively spicy. And you add some black, for some brown, you add some black, and you can end up with a very spicy mustard. But there are a lot of people that like things that are very spicy. Before I move over to making the whole grain mustard with this, wanted just to kind of bring up, what are some of the things that you can do in making a mustard? And with any of these three methods, you can use this method and you can add things to it that will take it in a different direction. One would be what we talked about, what they do in Italy, where they, then marinate dried fruits and then serve the dried fruits marinated in the mustard. It's absolutely delicious. I like making flavored mustards. I'm a spice guy. I have 125 different blends of spices in my spice cabinet, and there's so much opportunity. If you're making like a Dijon mustard, you could put some herb de Provence or some bon herbe de Paris to give it, just a hint of tarragon. If you like curries, and actually this is one I just made. This is a whole grain mustard that I made. I put some Davoren in, which is a sweet Indian curry. So curried mustards are quite nice, but you can take your favorite flavor. Do you like Ethiopian berbere? Well, you can put berbere in your mustard, and you'll get, in addition to the heat of the mustard, you'll get the chili heat from the berbere and the flavors of the berbere. I mean, there are literally hundreds and hundreds of ways that you can go just with spice blend. Harissa is fabulous for a spicy mustard. But it also does quite well with fresh herbs are very nice to put into your mustards. I mean, there are 10,000 directions to go. This is just the base. A little bit, I want to talk about the phytochemistry of the mustard seed. It is something that I hope everybody's wondering about, which is, a lot of people are uncomfortable with canning. They're uncomfortable with making something that's going to sit, in the refrigerator or whatever. When you're making a prepared mustard, even if you're making one that has no vinegar whatsoever, one that's just made with a different kind of a liquid. Mustard in and of itself has a very, very strong antibacterial quality, strong enough to completely protect it. It will break down the two main bacteria that we worry about, the two main pathogens, the Salmonella and the E. coli. And prepared mustard can sit in your refrigerator. In the recipe, I put 3 months, but mostly it's 3 months because these are recipes that have no oil in them. So after 3 months, they'll start to dry out and not be quite so pleasant. But there is very little to worry from the standpoint of bacteria and pathogens when you're making your mustard. Mustard is also intensely helpful as a food source. The mustard seeds are intrinsically they're antibacterial. They are they're very powerful antioxidants, and they're very powerful anti-inflammatory. As powerful and anti-inflammatory as turmeric. There is laboratory research to show that mustard seed is very effective even in shrinking tumors. But also mustard seed is very, very high in what we call flavonols, which is a type of an anti-inflammatory that's getting an awful lot of attention right now in the pharmaceutical world. And there was a recent article I've referenced before where flavonols are even showing that they have the ability to slow down the onset of Alzheimer's, and even to protect you intrinsically from Alzheimer's. I'm not saying that you'll get that effect, but it's looking like that might be one of the things that comes from it. But high levels of flavonols in mustard. I've been drinking tons of green tea, mostly just because that's one of the best ways to get flavonols as well. So mustard, it's intrinsically helpful, but it's also intrinsically an antibacterial. But the other thing we're doing is, for example, with this one, where we're adding vinegar itself is a very, very strong antibacterial. In fact, a lot of food companies in their permits to be able to demonstrate that they are safe to either shelf stable or safe to sell. It's based on the level of acidity that they have. If you're over a certain level of acidity, US FDA considers it to be shelf stable, and it's fine. I was hoping, if Thomas were here, he could talk for hours about this, because this is one of the fundamentals of his process, is getting to that level of acidity. I don't know. Have you heard, Chef AJ, about vinegars and how the major manufacturers of vinegar in the world in the last just few years have been reducing the acidity of their vinegars?
Well, I haven't heard that, but I know that that's how I hooked up with Thomas, because I didn't care for the 6% sharp vinegars, and his are 4%.
Yeah, but when you're making prepared foods like this and you're doing it because you want the acidity, it's a big concern, because standard vinegars now, instead of being 9%, are coming out at 8%, and there's worry for people that are canning or making other things where they're relying on that acidity. Am I getting enough acidity? I actually just the other day read an interesting article. It was published by the organization that does that puts out the master canner certifications, and their position is that because the recipes that almost everybody's using have such a high margin of safety, you can still use your same recipes and feel secure with them. But it's something to keep your eye on. And if I am thinking I'm comfortable with something because of the acidity in the vinegar, I'll usually splash just a little bit more in to make sure. I mean, this is half vinegar, half water, and that's a ratio I use all the time when I'm pickling. I don't know about you.
Neat. Does Thomas use your mustard in his dill mustard dressing?
He does not. But it's a great dressing. I like his dill mustard dressing.
Yeah. Hey, Nick, we have a question from a live viewer named Bit.
Yeah.
And the question, I just saw it. Here it is. Does local Spicery make a replacement for Kirkland's no salt 21 season blend? Mary McDougall spoke about it and now it's nowhere to be found. Incidentally, I was at Costco yesterday and at least my Costco in Roseville had it back.
Yeah, actually, we were just in Costco in Nevada and we saw the same thing, that it is back. And no, we don't have anything like that. And for me, fundamentally, it's an arbitrary number, but I don't have any blends that go more than 11 different flavors that are in it. I think when you get to the point that you have 11 different spices in a blend, it becomes very difficult to distinguish one from the other. But that's just who I am and how we roll. So we don't have one of those. And I was going to say the same thing you did. I just saw it in Costco. I think it's back.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Okay, so whole grain mustard is a different strategy altogether. We don't use the ground mustard at all. And whole grain is my favorite. I'm a Dijon guy. I love Dijon mustard. I love I love the white wine and the onion flavor, and I love the a l'ancienne or country style Dijons that have whole grain in them. The way that we make whole grain mustard is, we're not going to use the heat at all. We have the seeds that are in this jar that I've had marinating for 2 days now. This, as I said, it's half yellow, half brown, and this is swimming in half vinegar, half water. The vinegar that I'm using on this one is a cider vinegar, which has some intrinsic sweetness. I'm going to add a little bit more sweetness to it in the form of just a tiny bit of date sugar. But so the next step on this, what we want to do, we're gonna just take this, we're gonna run it through my food processor, and that's going to make our mustard. But first, what I want to do is I want to take a little bit of this out and reserve it. So when I put it back in, it's going to make sure we still have some whole mustard seeds in there, because I, for one, really kind of like finding whole mustard seed in my mustard. It just makes it feel more authentic. So I'm going to go a little more than a half cup because that looks like it's got most of the liquid. And I'm going to set that aside. And
Nick, did you know that Grey Poupon has sugar in it?
I did not know that.
Yeah, that might be a reason people like it so much.
I wonder how much, because when I eat it, I don't really detect sweetness. I usually
it comes in right after the citric acid and before something called spice. So there's more salt than sugar, but it does have sugar.
Wow, I didn't know that. My favorite of the French mustards is Maille, because they make the whole grain that's very nice. So this is just the remainder of that. I can't believe that they do that. Why would you?
The reason I know that is when I teach at Rancho La Puerta, which is often, we always do the balsamic Dijon glazed Brussels sprouts, and I can't really, enforce it on them and get them to buy what I need. And it just says so, we're not using a lot, but yes, it does have sugar.
Huh. Well, I might just put up online my recipe for Dijon mustard. I didn't do that because it's a little more complicated and takes a little bit more time. But basically, if you want to make your own Dijon mustard, I don't put any sugar in my Dijon. With the Dijon mustard, the brine that you make, which is water and vinegar, and for the Dijon I use a white wine vinegar. But you simmer it first with some garlic and some onion in it, which is how you kind of get that winey, oniony flavor that is, kind of tells us that it's a Dijon. Okay. So this is, people ask me whenever I use this. It's a fairly old now, just a very small Ninja food processor blender. My daughter bought it for me as a gift, and I love it because it's so simple to use, and it does small quantities very well. That's probably it. It's, it's okay if you have some mustard seeds that are still whole in there. Mostly what we're doing is we're cutting open most of the seeds, and we're releasing the starches, and we're releasing the flavors. I think I'm going to do just a little bit longer. It looks like it's not quite there. There we go. Okay, so at this point, and you probably have noticed in the last one as well, I added the sumac at the end after all the processing, and that's because in my experimentation, the sumac can add bitterness to the flavor of the mustard. My sumac. So I'm going to do a teaspoon of sumac. Then I'm going to put 1 tablespoon of date sugar. And, it really doesn't need the date sugar. In fact, we can say right now we're not going to do it. In fact, let's do half the date sugar. It's not very much. Notice, AJ, when you use date sugar, you have the luxury of pulling out a big bag that's got a name on it. I had forgotten to bring date sugar today, so I just was able to run down into the mill and pull some out of my bucket.
Yeah, usually I don't like the sugar as much as the liquid syrup or the paste. It's just I find it doesn't dissolve very well.
In this case, with the acidity that we're dealing with, everything dissolved. And now this is those unmilled whole mustard seeds and the remainder of the liquid. And we're just going to put it in there.
I'm curious if the live viewers will put in the chat, I don't know if they have a feature to do a poll, but I'm curious, are you guys more ketchup people or more mustard people? I'm definitely more mustard than ketchup.
Is that right?
Yeah, I don't even like ketchup. I don't know what it is about ketchup. I don't know if it's too sweet. That's why I've always preferred barbecue sauce. It had the smoky flavor, but I definitely like mustard better than ketchup.
I am, when it comes to food, I'm a Democrat, a true Democrat. I like everything. So this is it. I'm just going to put this here in this jug, and it's going to go right in the refrigerator. As I said before, it's not yet ready to eat. I want to bring it up so you can just take a look, see what it looks like. I don't know if I can without spilling it much, but there's a little bit to it. So when you put it in the refrigerator, it will continue to thicken. And the flavor that you've got here right now, it's going to start to lose the heat and the spiciness. So that's, 2 of the strategies we showed. The third one is just kind of a medium way between them, which uses, begins with the ground mustard and adds some whole seed. But it's for me, it's a liberating thing to be able to make my own mustard. It's really quite fun to be able to add any kind of flavor that you want and leverage it from there. Any of these mustards can just be the beginning, launch pad for a mustard sauce by just adding additional liquid and then using it. They'd make great marinades for tofu, for potatoes, for baked potatoes. That's my mushroom presentation. So I'll tell you, your question on mustard versus ketchup. I like ketchup on my potatoes, but I was telling Charles just before we started that I love mustard on tofu scrambles. The mustard on mushrooms and tomato and tofu, and it's delicious. So I go a lot of different ways.
Well, you are the ultimate spicier. Is that what your profession?
Spicerer.
Nice. So thanks. This was a lot of fun. And I remember learning how to make mustard in culinary school, but if you don't use it, you lose it. And I completely forgot how. And it's not that hard.
No, I think you'll find that this recipe I put out, it is very, very, very true to the French's mustard.
Well, next time you come to one of my gatherings, just bring me some already made though, okay?
Already in the plan.
All right. Well, next month is November, so we'll be seeing you hopefully with Thomas and hopefully again for Small Business Saturday and see what you got cooking for the holidays.
You can count on both.
All right. Thanks so much, Nick.
Hey, have a great day. It's good to see you.
Same here. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back tomorrow a little earlier at 9 a.m. Pacific time for Dr. Stefan Esser. He's a medical doctor, and I know you'll have lots of questions, but if you want them to get to the top of the queue, send them in advance. Just go to chefaj.com, subscribe to be on my mailing list. And when we send you the email announcing the guests, you just shoot us the question back.